Morning all. I'd love to get back on track looking at brilliant games, and I think I found a brilliant game for you this morning. Playing white was Grigory, Serper. Playing black was Ioannis, Nikolaidis. This was in the St. Petersburg Open of 1993, this game. Serper is a GM, born in Tashkent in the former Uzbek Soviet Socialist Republic. He learned to play chess at 6. At 16 he studied studies at the Moscow's famous Botvinnik-Kasparov Chess School. In 1992 he was a member of the Uzbekistan team. He won the silver medal in the 30th Chess Olympiad. In 1996 he moved with his family to the United States. He won the World Open tournament in 1999. Now his opponent Ioannis Nikolaidis, as you'd expect from the name, he's a Greek chess grandmaster, chess grandmaster. He won the Greek Chess Championship in 1995. Came third in the Balkan Individual Chess Championship of 2002. He played for Greece in the Chess Olympiads of 94, 96, 98, 2000, 2002, 2004 and 2006. So one of the strongest, Greek grandmasters in the last few years, in those years, playing in the Olympiads. So let's get on with the game. C4 from Grigory Serper. Or should we say Gregory Serper? Is it English? Sounds like Gregory. We'll call him Gregory from now on. So E4 after G6. C4, G6, then E4. And we have here, what we have is a transposition into the King's Indian defense. Now here, a slightly unusual move played by Grigory, Knight GE2. It is a system. After Knight BD7, the Knight now comes to G3, so supporting E4. And White is also able to play Bishop E2 with H4, H5 in this plan, because that's usefully not interrupting this diagonal. So let's see, C6, Bishop E2. After A6, now we see Bishop E3, and Black's not routinely castling. Perhaps wary of White's H4, H5 attack, Black plays a slightly unusual move now. Plays H5 now himself, and maybe this Knight's a target on G3 to be kicked back, but is Black weakening some squares by doing this? White just plays F3, okay, not being concerned at all by H4 gaining space, but Black counters now on the Queen side now with B5. Grigory plays C5, which kind of undermines a little bit Black's structure here. Tries to get some strengthening the grip on the dark squares. So we see D takes, okay, but has Black got the E5 square to play with, potentially? Queen C7, okay, now White castles. But in this position, you might think, hang on, H4, there's only one square for the Knight. Indeed, that happens. H4, we have Knight H1. Rather amusingly, but the Knight can reroute to F2, and maybe these dark square weaknesses will become important. For the moment, Black's also got access to the H5 square here, and uses that with Knight H5. We see Queen D2, and now Black not using E5 for a piece, but rather just putting a pawn there, perhaps to discourage White from playing F4. We see Knight F2, and now Knight F8, as though the dark square strategy for F4 is being continued here, maybe Knight E6, and you've got a lot of pieces eyeing that F4. That grip on F4 seems to be important to Black. In fact, if there wasn't a battery like this, maybe Bishop H6 would have been useful strategically as well to get rid of this dark square bishop. That would also leave D4 vulnerable for Knight E6. So positionally, Black is aiming for a dark square strategy and not being concerned with his king at the moment, still in the centre. You see A4, Black not wanting that A file, and plays B4. And here is where things start to get quite interesting. Can you spot White's next move in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting from Now, okay, white plays knight d5. So with the king in the centre, white's getting a pawn roller here in the centre. If black dares to take, these pawns would seem a bit dangerous. But what else can black do? Otherwise there's knight b6, that would be horrendous surely to allow knight b6. So black does take on d5. After e takes d5, okay, visually it looks frightening. But it's up to white to prove it now, if this is any good. Black counters with f5. Now we see d6, queen c6. It looks like for the moment a light square blockade on these pawns. Where are these pawns going? How can they be liberated further? But now a very interesting move now is played. I think making use of the fact that the black king's in the centre here. Can you guess what white plays in this position? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Or you might want to pause the video. Okay, white plays bishop b5. The bishop must be taken. It's pinning the queen. It's taken. After a takes b, it's clear the rook's vulnerable. And if queen b7, then maybe just c6, and these pawns are looking menacing, with the queen being pushed back, and there'll be at least d7 or even worse. We'll check that out in the second pass. But here, black decided to give up the rook and take away one of these pawns. Queen takes b5, rook takes a8, and trying to get that light square blockade back with queen c6. Now rook f8-1, so the rooks are connected on the a file here. Black plays though the move, forcing move, which appears to win more material. f4. Whoops, bishop's trapped. Is this backfiring on white, this whole plan? White just casually plays rook 1 to a7 here, allowing the bishop to be taken. It would still be protecting c5. These pawns are still dangerous. But black here is also threatened with things like rook e7, and rook c7 is also a menacing threat, it would seem, potentially, but actually queen takes a8. So we need to check out what the concrete threats are here for black. But for the moment, you'll observe this bishop hasn't got any squares anyway. So if black is worried about this 7th rank, it seems he's done something about it with knight d7, and knows that maybe this bishop's not moving anywhere particularly interesting. But white has some forcing moves available here. Can you guess what forcing move white plays in this position if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Okay, white plays rook takes c8 check, and black responds with queen takes c8. And now we see queen d5, threatening all sorts of things. Queen e6 and c6 are supported. Okay, this is starting to be dangerous with the king in the centre. Black takes on e3, check, king f8. Now with this knight attacked and it's with check, white just plays anyway in this position. Rook takes d7, not minding, it seems, ef, and that will be check as well. So he doesn't mind e takes f2. He's threatening mate. He just sidesteps more checks with king f1 in this position. So black surely has to do something about the mate. Queen e8, fending off the mate. So in this position, what is going on? White has a forcing sequence here, which is very interesting. Can you guess the forcing sequence? If I give you 10 seconds starting from now. Okay. Rook f7 check. Sacking a rook now. Queen takes f7. The idea is revealed. Check. Only one move. And now d7. So, is this the end of the game? No. King f7. Black has 3 pieces for the queen here. D takes. Rook takes. So will the queen be able to fight against these 3 pieces successfully? Check. And now, in this position, this passed pawn makes its presence felt with c6. But black has some dangerous dynamics surely, like this, and this bishop will be dangerous across the diagonal. He plays actually e4. And we see now c7. Okay. If white had taken, that looks to be potentially quite dangerous. Well, for a start, rook takes b7 would be on with bishop e5, just stopping the pawn queening. So, okay, so c7 it was. e3, and now very dangerous threat of e2 and e1 queening after taking. Check, 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 check. And now white decides in this position he can play queen takes e7. Yes, he is queening the pawn again. c8 queen. Now black does seem to be in a bad state here. Bishop h6. Plays on for a little bit. Check. Check. Stopping e2 for a moment if he wants, but check. But no, he's not afraid of e2 here. He plays queen takes g6 in this position. The little trap here is set after e2 check. If white took here, that would be knight f4 check. Whoops. But no, white can take on f2 here. We see the trap again set. If king takes, then knight f4. But no, white can play king e1, sidestepping the trap. And here, black's had enough. He resigned. The game shows dynamics of the king in the centre and dangerous pawns being flung at the opponent. Rooks on the 7th, counter sacrifices. Very interesting game, and it's been called the sacrifice immortal. There were quite a number of sacrifices in this game. Let's have a look in the second pass, technically, at this game. So the king's injured the fence with knight ge2. Okay. White slightly okay, nothing, not a big deal. h5 is liked by the engine here. If black did routinely say castle in this system, I think h4 might be strong, or at least playable. This kind of position, especially if black's already played c6 to have to use another move for c5, it looks potentially dangerous for black, this kind of position, because often after bishop g5 there might be a bishop sack or knight sack on h5 here. But anyway, we see h5 from black. After f3 we see b5. Now c5, dc, dc, queen c7. Black's dark square strategy seems to be okay at the moment. h4 is quite committal though. I mean, already black has played quite committally. If he castles, then you can imagine queen d2 and bishop h6, and there's more weaknesses than usual with that pawn on h5. So basically h4 gaining some space, knight h1. Nimzovich doesn't mind moves like knight h1 as long as the knight can re-centralize. Knight h5, queen d2, Okay, the use of a piece for e5 is potentially interesting. It's not that easy to kick it. I think f4 is knight g4. So perhaps this is worth considering in this position. The pawn being used instead. Okay, it's interesting. Knight f2, knight f8. Now a4. Okay, and you see the engine's worked out this idea, this resource actually, that knight d5 is quite interesting in this position. To play knight d5. Anything else like knight a2, maybe just a5, and black's actually doing okay. Black can look forward to knight e6 and knight d4. The dark squares both seem, you know, potentially useful for black, and technically black looks better here. So not a routine move, but knight d5, keeping things going. Very dangerous pawns now. Okay, so we see f5, which is interesting. It threatens to win bishop, and that's kind of soon to be ignored, basically, in the midst of things now with bishop b5 for a moment. That seems to be a very, very powerful move in this position. It does get a pawn roller. If black tries to defend the rook here, I think c6, queen b8, these pawns are very impressive. A crushing move apparently seems to be queen d5 in this position. What does queen d5 do? Let's take this further. This position. It seems visually impressive. this looks beautiful. Rook a8 or rook a7, but rook a8, check. And now there's a problem. If king e7, bishop c5 is mating, or d8 is mating quicker, d8 mating 1. So, and if taking here, then black loses the queen, I guess. So that's no good. So that kind of thing is to be avoided. So maybe black wisely chose a lesser evil move, or not. Indeed, maybe queen b7 was the best move here, apparently, in fact. But queen takes b5, okay, losing that rook. Queen c6. The other rook comes to support. Not minding about the bishop being lost. f4. It's still all good for white here, apparently. Rook 1 to a7. Now knight d7. What was the threat for white here? If we just do a threat analysis, rook takes c8 and rook e7 is actually a forced mating sequence. Let's go over that. If f takes here, rook takes c8, queen takes, check. In this position, queen takes b4 now threatens this diagonal that looks really vulnerable. Knight e6, check. Rook takes c7. This looks very, very unpleasant for black. Black's had it here. There's a forced mate as well, it seems. On e takes, just king takes as well. So that's to be avoided. So knight d7, good move here in circumstance, rather than taking the bishop. Knight d7. So here though, white still has a very dangerous initiative. Rook takes c8, and that's a very powerful queen d5 move. The bishop is taken now, and we see check. Rook takes d7. Maybe there's technically a stronger move here, you never know. Or no, rook d7 is coming up, but strong. Knight e4 is also potentially strong, but black, surely it would seem e2 is scary here, but actually, okay, king f2. So maybe that's why it's liked as well, this idea. It seems pretty bad for black. I think knight g5 might be the threat here, or rook d7. In fact, okay. So in the game anyway, rook takes d7 was played. Ef, king f1, avoiding queen c5 being check. Queen e8. And now this lovely forcing sequence, where it's the only move white can do to maintain the advantage. The rook sack, rook f7. So he gets black's queen from it with d7. So wins the queen. Check. Now these checks, okay, c6 for a moment. So e4 now threatens rook takes b7 and bishop e5. c7, e3. Check. If the black king goes backwards, then c8 is check. So it goes forwards, but that does allow now queen d6. Check. If rook e6, then maybe just taking and then check. So whatever happens here, it seems it's dangerous now. But even in this position, queen takes e7, just a queen again, and it's becoming all over really. But wonderfully dynamic game from white. Sidesteps the final traps. An interesting system as well against the King's Indian, really, this knight ge2, perhaps underestimated. I think I've seen a mention of it in a book by Raymond Keane many years ago when I was a junior player, for aggressive opening systems book. So knight ge2 is an interesting system. But the way white played it dynamically, with the pawns flooding the centre, the rooks coming on the a file, multiple sacks, really celebrating the advantages white had and turning them into other advantages all the time. Black's counterplay didn't reach too dangerous proportions. It was kept at a certain level. Okay, so hope you enjoyed it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.